Shout out to bring our Q, Julius, you legend. We're going to do a joint interview, yeah? Yeah, we'll do a joint interview, Julius. Thanks for the support. You're a legend. From your girls, Raven and Ellie.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this, and now it's time for some weekend picks. Time to surmise my thoughts on tomorrow's Boxer show going down in the United Kingdom. Those of you that have been following the channel will already know that I have April Hunter winning a points decision in the Babington rematch. I have Natasha Jonas stopping Candy Wyatt for the IBF welterweight title. And when it comes to Franchon Crews versus Savannah Marshall,
Let's talk about the fighters.
Franchon Crews is an, according to Hoyle, mid-range to inside pressure fighter. Her money punch is the looping right, the overhand right over the top.
Has a lot of success with that punch.
She had a lot of success with that shot in both the Marisela Cornejo fights and the more recent Aline Cedar-Ruz fight, but when it comes to tomorrow's fight with Savannah Marshall, I don't think she'll have the same success. Savannah is a more fluid and well-schooled fighter than those fighters were.
Better in every department, better in every area.
And a bigger puncher than those fighters were. A bigger puncher now, I think, than Franchon Crews is. They share some common opponents, with the difference being that Savannah stopped them and Franchon didn't.
Franchon Crews, a mid-range to inside pressure fighter that plays her opponent close to the chest and looks to smother them with activity, with volume.
What pressure fighters often do. Franchon's offense is her defense, overwhelming her quarry.
And listen, while her base style may be easy to understand, that doesn't make it easy to work around. You do need certain ingredients to take on a fighter like this and succeed.
And I believe that Savannah Marshall has them.
She has the ingredients.
Savannah Marshall, I think, has the answers to Franchon Cruz's come forward aggression. You will notice that Savannah is more nimble, more light on her feet than Franchon, more athletic.
Franchon's got heavy feet.
Slower feet than Savannah Marshall, and slower punches, slower overall than Savannah.
Wider, too.
You think about Savannah Marshall's height advantage, how she doesn't need to be right up on Franchon Crews to touch her with shots, touch her with punches, that she's taller, she's longer, she's faster.
Yeah.
I wouldn't accuse either fighter of being a speedster per se, but one of these fighters is noticeably quicker than the other, and that looks to me to be Savannah Marshall.
With Franchon, what you see is what you get.
From the opening bell, you know what she wants to do, get close to you and get off big overhand rights, looping shots, and she's had a lot of success with that punch in the past, but that's mostly because her opponents...
Static.
Her torso is static. These are stiff opponents that don't have the upper body movement and angling of a Savannah Marshall to keep that head off center.
Roll and counter.
You think about Marisela Cornejo, who's got leaky defense. You think about Aline Cedar-Ruz, a big, strong fighter, but a static fighter, very stiff.
Not as fluid as Savannah in any way.
Without Savannah's pedigree, I think Franchon Crews will find that it's hard to get close to Savannah and even harder to get off that looping right.
The way Savannah bends at the knees, bends at the waist, angles that torso away from punches and brings over counters.
Franchon's best bet here is to draw out Savannah Marshall, draw her into exchanges, draw her into a war, but Savannah knows that.
She said it herself.
Franchon wants to play her close to the chest. With Franchon, what you see is what you get, and what you notice about her is, while she can be a handful when she's putting punches together, she sacrifices defense for offense.
Yeah.
She can be caught coming in.
Often lunging and pushing with her punches in order to get within striking distance to bring other punches over.
It's the caveat of being the bigger puncher, and given Savannah Marshall's height, length, and shot selection, that she shows the cleaner, tidier work of the two, I could see Savannah walking Franchon Crews into several big shots, several big punches, while staying on her toes and fighting on the fly.
Mindset of the fighters, I firmly believe that Franchon Crews is overlooking Savannah Marshall. She was in attendance for the Shields fight, and she called her out immediately after.
I think she called her out before the judges' scorecards were even read. My interpretation of that is plain old opportunism.
That's what it was, that's what it is.
I believe she is underestimating Savannah Marshall. That's what I think. I believe that she saw that Shields fight and tells herself, well, if Clarissa beat her, then surely I can. When Clarissa Shields and Franchon Crews are very different fighters with very different skill sets.
Clarissa is a lot faster than Franchon Crews and more athletic.
What Franchon's got is volume, toughness, and power. She can punch.
Savannah's got his height, length, mobility, agility, and snappier shots, snappier punches.
With power. I see a situation where Savannah Marshall's going to set traps.
Show off the cleaner work.
Savannah's going to beat those feet to maintain space between her and Franchon, to walk her into big counters, big punches. Franchon doesn't have a choice. She has to close the distance to get to Savannah, and in doing so, she's gonna get walked into punches.
Big ones.
Franchon doesn't have the option of fighting this fight from the outside. She's the shorter, stumpier fighter. She has to get close to Savannah, whereas Savannah's got more than one way of fighting this fight.
Yeah, she can sell out in the pocket and bang in the booth or box from the outside. Set her up.
Said it many times leading up to this fight that, for my money, Savannah's a bigger puncher than Franchon Crews.
How many girls has Franchon fought that can put a dent in her?
That can use that come-forward aggression against her.
How many?
Savannah Marshall on points is the conservative choice, the logical choice, and I am going with Savannah. I am going with Savannah to win. I don't rule out a knockout, given how come-forward and aggressive Franchon is. It's entirely possible that she walks into a shot that takes her out, but she is durable.
I anticipate that Savannah's going to be fighting on the fly, not sitting on her punches.
She'll be on her toes, and I think she will out-hustle Franchon Crews. I'm going with Savannah Marshall to lift the undisputed crown tomorrow from Franchon.
I think Franchon miscalculated, and I think she's underestimating Savannah.
In men's super middleweight and light heavyweight news, former WBO light heavyweight champion Joe Smith Jr. says he has no problem with facing David Benavidez if he moves up, a fight that would be contingent upon David venturing north of super middle to light heavy. That's not about to happen, least of all with Canelo Alvarez inking that 3-fight deal with the PBC.
That'll be the focus of all David's efforts.
His excuse not to fight anyone with a pulse, Joe Smith Jr. included Joe, who, before he shoves a long line of light heavyweight contenders out of the way, Joe reveals that he isn't willing to budge a single inch. Moving up for Benavidez is a bit of a long shot.
Joe Smith Jr. isn't about to move down.
Bit of a stalemate when you think about it. David's not moving up to light heavy.
No,
Though if he does, the former WBO champion will be more than happy to check his chin at the door. I'd be open to that fight, Smith told BoxingScene.com. I've never turned down any fight. Things weren't exactly peaches and rainbows for Smith the last time he took on a big puncher.
In June of last year,
Smith was annihilated at the hands of the hard-punching Artur Beterbiev, losing via a second-round stoppage. I want to say that David Benavidez is not at 168 what Artur is at 175. I don't think for a second a fighter like Caleb Plant would be able to go 12 rounds with Artur, but he did go 12 rounds with David.
says it all, doesn't it?
Don't give me the crap about styles making fights. Styles make fights. Both David Benavidez and Artur Beterbiev are both pressure fighters. Artur's just better at it, and a bigger puncher.
Artur, who knocked out Joe Smith Jr. in Joe's last fight,
getting it taken to him, however, hasn't left Smith feeling unnerved. In fact, the 33-year-old is hoping that he'll spend the rest of his days facing the best of the best. For now, Smith will do what he always does, saunter to his local gym, remain in shape, and continue to spend quality time with the family. While doing those chores, he'll make sure that the ringer on his phone is on high. I'm just waiting to see if any offers come my way.
I remember after Artur's last fight, the fight with Anthony Yarde in the UK, that Frank Warren promoted. Frank said he was going to see about making a Yarde versus Smith fight.
The article clearly states that Joe Smith Jr. is waiting for offers because he hasn't gotten any yet. That leads me to believe is that we're not exactly on the eve of a Smith versus Yarde fight, though I could go for it, and I'd sooner expect that fight to happen than a fight between Joe and David. David's been hiding out at super middleweight for years, and that's not about to change.
Not now that Canelo's over there.
Joe seems open to facing David should he ascend to light heavyweight, and he's not alone. Artur Beterbiev himself wants either Canelo Alvarez or David Benavidez beyond the upcoming Callum Smith fight.
That's according to Bob Arum, who promotes him.
Canelo Alvarez didn't just sign a 3-fight deal with the PBC to fight Bob's boys, to fight top-ranked fighters, and now that he's over there, I hardly think David will choose now to ascend to the light heavyweight division. Needless to say that these suggestions from Bob are all pie in the sky.
What's interesting about all of this is it seems that the boys at light heavyweight are waiting for David to move up.
They're waiting for David to move up, kind of like how Keith Thurman was waiting for Danny Garcia to move up all those years ago. Those guys at 175 have identified David Benavidez as a person of interest, while he still wades in the kiddie pool at 168, where he has a noticeable size advantage over most of the opponents.
Most other super middleweights, he wouldn't have a size advantage or a power advantage at 175, which is likely why he hasn't gone up there yet.
Beterbiev would love to fight Canelo or Benavidez once it comes out that an organization is taking a stand which is based on principle title, that they don't want a Russian national fighting for a title, I salute that, because I am completely dedicated to Ukraine and Ukrainian people. I'm not going to do anything to affect that determination. Benavidez is a really good fighter, and Canelo is a really good fighter.
He says he's all about the Ukrainian people while promoting a Russian national, a Russian fighter with a Canadian citizenship, though all the same.
Artur Beterbiev is just as Russian as Dmitry Bivol, and he's using the WBC stance, their hardline stance against Russian fighters, as a smokescreen to not pursue the Bivol fight, even though it's the only fight to make at 175.
Seems more interested in a Canelo fight that isn't likely to happen, or a David Benavidez fight that isn't likely to happen.
David don't want no parts of Artur.
Some years ago in 2020, when David Benavidez lost the WBC title on the scales, missing the weight, he was offered a top spot at light heavyweight that would have lined him up for an Artur Beterbiev fight, and they elected to forego that route.
They didn't want it.
WBC's logic was sound that if David was struggling to make the super middleweight limit, the natural thing to do is to move up in weight, and they were willing to give him a top spot at light heavyweight. The problem was, Artur was WBC champion then, he's still WBC champion now, and David don't want no parts of that guy.
In spite of their gracious offer years ago in 2020, Samson Lukowicz elected to have the WBC reinstate David as a super middleweight, even though he blew the weight and lost his title on the scales.
They didn't want to campaign as light heavyweights years ago. They don't want to campaign as light heavyweights years later. The competition for David is a lot stiffer at light heavyweight than what it is at super middleweight.
David's a pressure fighter like Artur, but without the bells and whistles and without the boxing acumen.
Pressure fighters, that base style, they have tiers, they have grades. Like any other base style that's out there, there are levels. And Artur Beterbiev, Chocolatito, Roman Gonzalez, these are high-level pressure fighters.
Whether you're talking about Artur Beterbiev's double-end triple jab or Chocolatito's slipping punches while closing the distance,
rolling and riding punches to bring over counters, or Artur Beterbiev's shot selection, getting body shots in there just under the elbow, or uppercuts that split the guard up the middle,
hooks around the guard to the side.
These are better pressure fighters than David Benavidez. David Benavidez is a very basic, no-frills pressure fighter. Doesn't have the footwork and movement or shot selection of a Artur Beterbiev, or the upper body movement and angles of a Chocolatito.
Do you think that Caleb Plant would have went 12 rounds with Artur?
Guy got stopped by Canelo, for Christ's sake. A naturally smaller fighter than Artur and David, and in many ways Caleb.
Canelo was able to stop Caleb, but David didn't.
That's because David is a very basic, no-frills pressure fighter.
Best parallel is David Benavidez being at 168 what Jarrett Hurd once was at 154, what Brendan Figueroa currently is at 126.
Basic fighters, basic pressure fighters, very basic.
Common denominator, the tie that binds them all, is that these are very statuesque fighters for their divisions, and that gives them somewhat of an advantage, but that's the kind of thing that works up until it doesn't.
And their size, they use it to compensate for the skills that they don't have.
David is ordinary.
Basic, and that's why he's still at 168. He's been at 168 for all these years, and he's going to be there a while longer, so don't hold your breath for him to move up anytime soon. And finally, today's bombshell announcement. It appears that while we were all under the impression that Canelo would be facing Jermell Charlo, he's going to be facing Jermell, and both he and Jermell announced their upcoming fight in September via their social media. We have confirmation on both sides. Was there a miscommunication between the journos and their sources as to which Charlo Canelo would be fighting? Were they under the impression that it was Jermell, not knowing it was Jermell, or was this a last-minute replacement?
I don't know. There's so much to unpack here.
Let me start off by saying that this is confirmation of what I already thought, not necessarily in reference to Canelo, in reference to Tim Tszyu. Literally, in my previous video that I uploaded before this one, I told you I was skeptical as to whether or not Charlo versus Tszyu would happen. And if you've been following this channel the last couple of months,
You'll know that I've always been skeptical.
that the amount of time Jermell Charlo has spent away from the ring makes a Tim Tszyu fight a risky fight. And while a Canelo fight is just as, if not more risky, this fight has all the rewards that the Tszyu fight doesn't have. This is Jermell's chance to become a two-time undisputed champion for the most money that he can hope to make anywhere at or around these weights. Whereas with Tim, that's just a mandated title defense.
There's not that much in it for Jermell.
The prediction stuck. I didn't think Charlo versus Tszyu would happen. I anticipated that at some point the WBO title would go vacant and either Tim Tszyu will be elevated to full champion or he will be given the chance to fight for the vacant title.
But the prediction stuck. Tszyu versus Charlo doesn't look to be happening.
This fight will. Is this a better fight than the Jermell Charlo fight? I've mixed feelings. I feel ambivalent because I actually rate Jermell Charlo and I don't rate his brother. I don't rate Jermell.
Jermell Charlo's ranked on the Ring IQ pound for pound list, whereas Jermell, he isn't and never
In
was.
some ways, I view this as a somewhat better fight than a Jermell Charlo fight because Jermell, I don't view him as good a fighter as his brother, not as ambitious, not as proven. He's never been an undisputed Ring Magazine and lineal champion, and I feel that his brother has all the ambition and hunger that he doesn't have. Even if he campaigns 2 divisions south of Canelo, I feel like he's got more fight in him than Jermell.
I mean, I didn't give Jermell any kind of chance to beat Canelo Alvarez, not over 2 years removed from the sport. And while Jermell, he's been away over a year, that's still less than his brother.
Some people are going to call this a cherry pick because Jermell Charlo campaigns 2 divisions south of Canelo.
Some people.
Canelo's detractors, likely the same detractors that just so happen to be Errol Spence Jr. fans and the same Errol Spence Jr. fans that were okay with him fighting Mikey Garcia, who campaigned 2 divisions south of him.
Double standards.
My honest opinion is that this is a better fight than the Jermell Charlo fight. Not the best fight, but better than that one.
It's at least better than that one.
But I didn't expect this. This was the last thing that I was expecting to hear. Undisputed champion versus undisputed champion. That's the marketing angle, and I think this fight will sell.
Where does this leave Jermell?
Was he ever actually in the running for a Canelo Alvarez fight? Now that he's not fighting him, is he going to move forward with that proposed Demetrius Andrade fight? You will remember that they held a conference call via Instagram with each other, detailing a fight between them in the fall.
That's still foolhardy.
I don't know if it happens. I don't know if they're actually moving forward with that, but if they do, it's foolhardy on Jermell Charlo's part to take on somebody like Demetrius having been gone for so long.
So I don't know if that happens.
So at minimum, what we know is that Jermell ain't fighting Canelo, Jermell is fighting Canelo. And if Jermell is fighting Canelo, he's not fighting Tim Tszyu.
And if he's not fighting Tim Tszyu, and he's not staying at 154, he won't be there for Terence Crawford.
Remember, Terence Crawford had intentions of fighting him beyond the Errol Spence Jr. fight, the chance to become a 2-time undisputed champion. It seems that that ship has sailed.
He's not going to be there for Terence to fight him.
So maybe what Terence can do, if he beats Errol Spence Jr., is take on Tim Tszyu, provided that Tim becomes the next WBO champion. And it's looking like he's going to.
You know, I said a couple of days ago I could see that happening.
This is quite the announcement, and we're going to be talking more about this in the days and weeks to come.
I was not expecting this.